Welcome to Technical Leadership Talks, the podcast that brings you advice, insights, and knowledge from industry leaders and experts on how to navigate managing in a technical field. Technical Leadership Talks is brought to you by Texas A&M University's Master of Engineering Technical Management, an online graduate program that trains industry professionals for leadership positions. I'm Katie, METM's digital marketer and your host for this episode. In today's episode, I speak with John Hughes, the president and EQI executive coach at EI Assessments. He has worked with a wide range of industries and professions to do EQI assessments and coaching for leadership and executive development. Recently, John worked with 112 Lincoln Lab Group leaders, assistant group leaders, and other professional staff members by conducting one-on-one debriefings and coaching sessions using the data from their EQI reports. In this episode, we are going to cover the analysis of the data he collected during these sessions that provide insights into the skills necessary for success in this environment. Before we get into the data, though, you're going to hear a small snippet of the EQ assessment John did with me to give you an idea of what one of these assessments and coaching sessions sounds like. Can you just explain a little bit about who you are and what you do?
If I go back into the 1990s, right? I worked for IBM until 1988. Then I moved over to work with the New York Times. In IBM, the stock price was dropping, so it was time for me to move on. And I got a job as a staff trainer for the New York Times. I eventually worked myself up in about a year or so into the role of internal HR consultant, which is similar to a business partner role. And 1995 is when the book Emotional Intelligence was published by Dan Goleman. And I was probably one of the first people to read it. He was working for the New York Times as a science editor. And I actually had opportunities over the years to meet him. But the whole concept to me was absolutely fascinating. Because I always wondered why I had certain sensitivities that other people didn't have. How come I, saw things a certain way or had a certain sensitivity to emotions? And it put a lot into perspective for me, the original book, Emotional Intelligence. Then his second book came out, Working with Emotional Intelligence, the following year. Then in 1997, I got certified in the EQI. It was one of the first instruments out there to actually measure emotional intelligence. So I used it at the New York Times until about 2008 when I left and started my own business, my own executive coaching firm. And the cornerstone of everything I do is emotional intelligence. It goes across all different industries, all different job groups. There's not a profession out there in a way that I haven't touched with the instrument. And what had happened over the years is I would do I started in 2008, and one of my first customers was Major League Baseball. I was brought in. I was able to visit 12 different baseball. Yeah, the front offices, the 12 baseball teams. Locally with you, it was the Houston Astros I got a chance to work with. And what happened over the years is I was just collecting more and more emotional intelligence data to the realization I became an accidental researcher. It wasn't until the pandemic hit in 2020 that I looked back on all the data that I had and said, okay, well, what was the summary of all the data I had up until March of 2020? Then each year I've been looking at it, separate individual years to see how emotional intelligence has gone up or down as a result of the pandemic. So the majority of my work is one-on-one with people. It's been really great. I've done just this year alone, since March of 2022 and this March, since March of 2023 and this March, I've done over 300 EQIs. So it's something that just kind of drives people to work with me. And it's been a lot of fun. So it's given me some interesting data. And what I do now is I break it down into job groups. Back in 2021, I met Dr. Zogi, who came across one of my newsletters and reached out to me. We had some nice conversations. And he said, by the way, you're running the graduate degree program at Texas A&M. Would you like to be a coach? And for the last 3 years, I had an opportunity to work with him and the student cohorts we've been working with, which has been really phenomenal. And it's the engineering brain. It's the engineers that I found on Comcast, the same engineers I work with at MIT Lincoln Lab. I've done about maybe 300 EQIs in both those organizations. So it's interesting. Sometimes I'll look at a profile and say, that's a lawyer, that's an engineer, that's a teacher. There's certain job groups that attract certain high scores, So we kind of want to move in those areas. We got to leverage your strengths. So at the same time, it's an opportunity for me to say, okay, here's your strengths, but here's some other areas that you should look at, in order to develop, in order to kind of leverage all of these skills to make sure you're hitting your potential, you're maximizing who you want to be and where you contribute. So it's been fantastic. It's been a lot of fun.
Before we get into my report, because we're going to go over my report to kind of give everyone an idea of what this is. Why do you think that EQ is important in leaders?
Yeah. It is I think it's a big factor. And by that, I mean, you have to be able to connect with people. You, as a leader, you have to acknowledge the power and authority you have and know how you show up with it and know how it influences other people, good or bad. I've had some really tough conversations with people, but the three areas I look at, mainly, or I first look at when I look at a score, is self-actualization. Is the person doing what they're supposed to be doing? Empathy. Can they understand their feelings and understand other people's feelings? Assertiveness. Can they make a request of other people without being too strong, and with being heard as well? So what I've learned is that each one of these skills, you definitely, you can see the strength behind it, but also the opportunities to kind of raise them all up.
Right.
Because some people develop your life has developed them to be high in assertiveness, to be high in empathy, and sometimes those high scores can hold a person back. A person with too high a level of empathy they don't like to give feedback. They end up burned out sometimes. A person with a high level of assertiveness can come up as a bully if he or she doesn't realize that they have to be able to you balance all those skills.
It's like a balance.
Yeah. And that's the common work I have regardless of industry. People are looking to develop their leaders. And that's why I've done so many of these. I've done well over 3,000 of them. And I'm getting to the age now where I'm able to say to a person, look at that data. That's going to hold you back unless let's just start focusing on it. Let me give you some suggestions to consider. So to me, while I have them, going through the data and their minds are open to listening to me, that's why I try to make my greatest impact, just with a suggestion.
Okay, well, let's get into mine. Let's analyze me.
Yeah. All right, so let's get into your data. The first score I look at is self-actualization at 93. And self-actualization I often describe as a person's goal line. And by that I mean, are you playing the right sport in the right stadium, the right instrument, the right band? Are you doing something that's building objectives to hit the potential that you have inside you? Where this self-actualization, that's my 3-year question, where you want to be in the future. And there's a certain amount of clarity that you have out there. You want to be marketing at A&M, supervisory roles. So certain things that you're heading for right now. So you're kind of in learning mode is one way of describing it. You're taking in a lot every day. And you may not talk to people every day about that 3-year goal. This might have been the first conversation you've had with anybody about it. You carry it inside you. And I want people to know that's where you want to go. That's where you're headed, right? Very important. Then I go to the middle of the profile, empathy at 124. That 124 tells you you're a natural empath. Okay, you walk into any environment, like it or not, you pick up on all the emotion in the room. If there was 10 people standing in front of me, you could probably accurately tell me how each one of those individuals is feeling, because there's just has that sensitivity. You listen with a third ear almost, where you pick up the tone, the inflection, the body language. And that's why sometimes at the end of the day, you might feel exhausted because you're hanging around 20 people. You could pick up 20 stories. And if they're all happy people, you'll come home happy. If they're all angry people, you'll come home a little angry. There's something about your ability to kind of sponge up all the feeling around you, which is very important. My question there around your high level of empathy is, do you happen to own a cat or a dog or any kind of a pet at all?
I own a dog, yes.
Okay, I don't know 2 dogs. I've always had dogs in my life. Why are dogs so important? Because you come home exhausted, right? You can see yourself at the end of the day. You walk through the door. The first one to greet you going to be the dog, right? Katie's home. She's going to run the gate. Unconditional love. There's something about animals, pets, gerbils, that people pick up on automatically because it's focusing in the present. It's focusing on the energy around you. So that's why I believe dogs, cats, animals, they're reparative to us, because you go into work, you wake up every morning with an empty cup. You go into work and that cup starts to fill with other people's emotions. So by the end of the day, you're weighed down, you lose yourself. But there's something about animals, kids, pets, hobbies that restore our empathy. So that's where you kind of had that, use dogs kind of as your trampoline. No matter whatever people take around, boom, the dogs, the animals, whatever you're doing is going to give it back to you, because that empathy is very important. In fact, I always recommend people, you Google or research a little bit of the natural empath, right? That's what you are, because again, you have that high level of sensitivity. It's a gift and a curse. Right. The gift is you can accurately read how other people are feeling. The curse is it wears you down with so much other people's emotions. You are what I describe as a non-directive coach.
Mm.
And in a non-directive style, I recommend asking a lot of what questions. Okay, so we get into this space, physical, virtual, doesn't matter, and you have a report that I send in, and I'm showing up with my arms crossed. I'm not looking for feedback at all. You even sense that. You go, oh, John's not looking at this. Want to ask me two questions. The first question is, John, when you did this work, when you did this report, what do you think you did really well? And use your empathy. Just sit back in your chair, because empathy is all about listening, right? I would say, what Katie? Yeah, John, when you did this report, what do you think you did really well? And I said, well, I got the data right. I got the format right. I'm starting to unfold my arms. I got the format. I got the data. I got the information. I got the timeline. I got something right. Okay, John, second question. John, if you had to do this report over again, what would you do differently? Because giving feedback is all about ego management. So the first question, what did I do well? It's going to lower my ego. I'm going to be able to do. What should I do differently? Well, maybe I would have used different data. Maybe I would have used a different format, or it might have been an interpersonal thing. Okay, if I had to do it over again, I wouldn't yell at Joe, or I wouldn't yell at Marie, something like that. Or maybe it was a process thing. Well, if I had to do it over again, I would have gotten you involved before I distributed the report. But you're giving me some space to reflect on my own work. So instead of you giving me feedback, ask me to self-assess. What did you do well? What would you do differently? What do you need from me? What resources are available? What have you learned trying to fix this problem? A lot of what questions.
I never thought about how you can use that as a strength to do this part of the job.
Yep, because it's all about listening. You're a world-class listener. You pick up on so much data out there that you want to be able to frame. You want to take in the whole person as they're talking about their performance. See, if I work for you, you might say, oh, John's performance is failing. What do I need to do? You don't need to do anything except point out to me that, John, what do you want to do different? What do you want to do better? You kind of keep it on me is very important, And again, that's the kind of style that would make you, in fact, you be a terrific coach just with these scores, the awareness and the empathy, because you know how to pull it out of people. A directive coach is going to say, hey, John, grab a piece of paper, John. I'm going to tell you exactly what you need to do differently next time. John, number one, number two, number three. That's being directive. And you probably had that when you started your job. I'm new. What do I do? Okay, here's what you do. A, B, C, D. So that's how we learn. You're kind of want to pull it out of people. That's what's very important to you.
I do want to go over your Lincoln Lab data and what you noticed from the engineers. What were their EQ scores? And also, what skills do you think engineers need to develop in order to be great leaders in their fields?
Yep. And I broke the data down between group leaders and assistant group leaders, because because assistant group leaders, they tend to be in learning mode because they're looking to move up in the organization, where group leaders, they're all engineers, which is the fascinating thing. The skills that are most important to a group leader, in order of priority. The first thing, believe it or not, is social responsibility, the ability to build a consensus. Because you could be the smartest person in the room, but if you don't know how to collaborate with other people and let your ego down and ask questions and pull people in, and again, be collaborative. Again, consensus is the word that keeps coming back. If you haven't got that, you're going to have limited success no matter where you go. But particularly in the engineering space, you'd be out to, and particularly at Lincoln Lab, which does a lot of your Department of Defense work. How do I get people to follow me? How do I get them enrolled in the concepts that are really important to me? The second score is impulse control, and impulse only because I said the most effective engineers I've found, they're really smart. They know what they know, but they're also curious about what they don't know. Impulse control, it's just that. It's their ability to kind of ask questions, not move too quickly. The ability to pull in information. And that's why you can see the connection between your curiosity, your collaboration, and the ability to learn with groups of people. Right. Because you could be you could be the smartest person out there within the skill area that you specialize in, but unless you get other people to listen to you, and that all comes down with social responsibility, the ability to connect to other people. I also noticed that group leaders, they tend to score high in self-actualization. And self-actualization, that's the goal. And that's one of those scores that's absolutely fascinating to me with Lincoln Lab. It's because there's always two flavors of self-actualization. Self-actualization, a lot of times, I'm going to score 110, 115 because I want to be a group leader. There's certain things I want to do in the organization. It's the title I'm going. I want to move up from being a group leader to moving into the division office. So there's a drive in a particular area. Then I find people with self-actualization that score like 100, 102, 103, like kind of low self-actualization. And when I ask them, what do you want to be doing 3 years from now? They don't want to move up into the organization. They're not looking to take on any more responsibility or any role, which is great. But when I ask them, what do you want to be doing in the future? They'll say, I don't know what I'm going to be working on 3 years from now. I just want to be impactful. I hear that word impactful so much in a lab environment because, just because I don't want to be the next leader of the group doesn't mean I don't want to have an influence over it. So there's something about having that goal of working in the right kind of environment that lets people connect and bring their best self, if you will. Another skill that I find also that also supports the social responsibility is independence. So in other words, if you're going to be a group leader and same is true for Comcast. Comcast also has group leaders in a similar structure in a way, is that you need to come to the party with some level of knowledge, some specialty. Because I think careers are built on me having a specialty and my ability to connect my specialty with other people's specialties. So that's why independence is high, decision-making high, a certain amount of knowledge is high, and it's even higher to be able to connect with other people. Because I know some people with high levels of social responsibility, but really low independence, which means they can't operate outside of a group. Other people with high levels of independence and low social responsibility, they're like gunslingers. They want to be out there on their own and not looking to collaborate with other people. So it's a combination of both of these that I think is very important. And that's where I tend to see with the group leaders at Lincoln Lab. Other areas which are strong, stress tolerance. To be a group leader, you need to be able to manage stress. Because some of that managing of stress comes through with people looking to push their creative idea. You're a group leader. I come to your office. I got a brilliant idea. Whoa, how do you slow me down? How do you ask those kind of questions where you're not trying to kill my idea, but you want to make sure I've thought about everything that I should be thinking about? And with that as well, they also score a high level of empathy. So to be a group leader, there's that level of listening that you have to develop at some point. And that's why it's almost developing as high as the level of social responsibility, which means if I'm going to work with this group and I'm the leader of it, I have to show up willing to listen to everybody individually and collectively. Got to be able to pull out those skills. I got to be able to sense when people need to speak to me. Because not everyone's just going to raise their hand and say, I need to have a conversation with you. As a leader, I got to pick it up. I got to be able to see who hasn't spoken, who's the quietest in the room. Is everyone contributing? Is everyone learning? There's a certain aspect to a combination of empathy and social responsibility that's very important. So those are the top 4 or 5 top skills. The low skills around, it's almost every engineer I find that the areas that they struggle with from time to time, the two that come across are interpersonal relationship skills and emotional expression. And interpersonal relationship skills, it's funny, they're higher among the group leaders, but it's just interesting. Where I'm pulling all because I've been physically at the Lincoln Lab. And sometimes some of the people I've spoken with, they're almost interpersonally awkward a little bit. They're really smart, they're brilliant, they want to say something, but they kind of show up and they're hesitant to kind of work with you interpersonally. The skills out there, the skills in the lab, and it tends to be most connected with those group leaders that are in positions where they have to sell their ideas to the government or have to sell their ideas to industry, because that's where the skills are really important. I mean, it's not as if the whole organization always has interpersonal skills, but those people I've noticed with the highest level of interpersonal skill in those environments, they're selling. They're selling internally, external, but there's connections that they make to people from time to time that are very important. Emotional expression tends to be low. Not sure why, other than they put their energy around listening, trying, knowledge acquisition, things like that. So it comes down expressing emotionally. They may struggle at times to find the right word or to find the right concept, because again, they're driven by logic, they're driven by process, they're driven by how do I find the best solution here, not necessarily thinking about how they feel about things. Not really necessarily knowing how to express concern or even you express some of the feelings that they're picking up. So expression is something that in certain job groups, certain areas, and that's the way that's why people's individual lives come into that as well. I might have never been validated while young, or maybe I was in a family that we just didn't talk emotionally as a result. If my family never engaged in emotional discussion or emotional validation, then I may grow up not having it validated myself. I may struggle at times to express how I feel, but that's one of the low scores. As I mentioned before, optimism. Engineers tend to score low in optimism because they're looking for that thing to break as opposed to acknowledging necessarily what's working. Other areas, flexibility. Flexibility isn't necessarily one of the highest scores of engineers. They appreciate flexibility, But sometimes if if I'm an engineer and I have a certain process or certain methodology that I use to solve my problems, you come to me and say, I have a better methodology. I'm going to say, well, I'm not looking for a better methodology unless you can show me the data that tells me I need to change. So engineers aren't necessarily looking for that next idea to adapt to, the next idea to try. It's more about, I like what I'm doing. I do what I'm doing. It's successful. So unless you have something that's better, you got to prove it to me. And prove it to me by showing me the data that what I'm doing is not as effective, as efficient as maybe another concept or another approach or another methodology you might have. And they score okay in emotional self-awareness. This isn't their strongest skill, which means that there might be an opportunity for them to do what you're doing. You spend a little bit more time every day with yourself, which is acknowledging where you want to be in the future. I think that's very important. I remember once reading, too much focus on the past can be depressing. Too much focus on the future can be anxiety provoking. How do you find the happiness in the moment? How do you find the fun in the moment? That's what you find with your dog. That's what you find exercising. Yeah. That's the happiness that some people either deny themselves or they don't realize that they need in order to round off their leadership style. And I think that also comes down to your approachability. Let me see, in terms of approachability, that's an interpersonal skills. I've met some really smart people that may not look very approachable. They can be intimidating without realizing. In fact, it's worse. I actually met a college professor that had a very low level of approachability, high assertiveness, low empathy, which meant she liked to talk, she liked to direct, but she didn't like to listen. I even said, listen, I think you create a lot of fear with your students. And she said, really? I said, you seem proud of that. Well, I don't mind if my students are afraid of me. And I asked her, tell me, how does you not being approachable, how do you being distant from your students, how does it make them better? And she couldn't answer that question. It's like she developed this style of, I guess the ego gets in the way, but there was a part of her that prided herself on not being approachable. And when I challenged it, she didn't have an answer for it, which is, that's something to think about. If your students aren't coming to you and reaching out, how are you winning? How are they winning? So just to kind of create the environment where people can sit with you and tell you or ask you, I think is very important. I've done the same thing with some managers. I had a manager recently. He scored very high in the service, very low in empathy, very low in impulse control. And I was at a conference and I was going out to lunch, right? And he kind of pulls me over to the side, goes, "Can you go through my EQI report?" I said, "Man, I just want to go to lunch." He goes, "No, man, can you do my EQI?" I said, "Please, I just have 10 minutes for lunch and I got to get back to the conference." He said, "No, tell me about my scores." So I look at the scores and I see the low empathy, high assertiveness, low impulse control. I said, "Listen, man, you create fear in your organization." He goes, "What?" "Yeah, you create fear in your organization." In other words, with this assertiveness, you give me a direction. And you want me just to go out and do it. You don't want me to come back and ask you questions. You're not willing to listen to me. Look at your empathy. You're barely listening to people at all. You're driven by your assertiveness. I think high levels of assertiveness, low level of empathy, you create fear in the organization. So what about my impulse control? I say your low impulse control, that's what's keeping me from lunch right now. You weren't sensitive to the fact that I was hungry. That's your low empathy. Your assertiveness, you just want to talk about what you want to talk about. And your impulse control stopped me right before as I'm heading to the cafeteria here. So again, you're creating a certain amount of reputation for a certain leadership style. I don't think you're getting the best out of your people. What do I need to do? You need to listen. You need to spend another 30 minutes. You need another 30 seconds with people. And when you give someone the direction, give a couple of seconds to see if they have any questions about it, to see if they have any clarity that's required of that. You're just kind of moving through life. And I think in doing that, you might be successful, but I don't think you're getting the best out of your people, which is what I think you want, right? But yeah, well, that's what you have to do. Spend a little bit more time listening. Now can I go to lunch? I think once I had this 10 minutes with him, it was like one of those things where his scores were playing out right in front of me.
Right.
Which was kind of interesting because I love to have people to say, yeah, the data is the data, but I'm experiencing it real time with you. So there's the opportunity.
I feel like you could read people so well. Since you practice this so much.
Yeah. A lot of it, I ask people, tell me again, give me 5 minutes about your life so far. Tell me, and that's when people tend to hit the high points. When those high points, it tends to reflect to the scores as well.
So people will listen to this podcast. If anyone's interested in taking the test themselves. Or even coaching, would you be open? Do I put this on here like a link to? Okay.
Sure. Yeah, the link is fine. My email address. I'm also certified to certify other coaches in the EQI.
Okay.
I do
Okay, cool.
certification programs like every other month or so. And I like to keep the classes really small. I only certify like 3 or 4 people at a time, because it's one of those things where I've gotten to the point in my career where I love doing the one-on-ones with people, but I also like training
So
other coaches.
people, you can spread it. Yeah.
Exactly. That's the fun part, because it's taken me years to come to that methodology to go through it so quickly as I did. And that's what people appreciate, because people want to get through the data quickly and effectively and walk away with some to-dos. What should I do differently, or what can I consider doing differently? That's why you talking to other marketing managers, that's going to give you certain insights into the role.
Okay, well, I'll put those in the description of the podcast episode for those who are listening who want to go check it out. Our hour is almost up, but do you have any last minute insights that you want to give, or are you good to go?
Yeah, just one of those things. It's what you're doing, which you earlier, because it's energy management. There's a great book out there, The Power of Full Engagement. Tony Schwartz is one of the authors. It talks about the energies we have. The first energy is physical energy: eating, sleeping, hydrating, exercising, all the things that you're doing. Your physical energy is strong. When your physical energy is strong, it supports your emotional energy. And that's what the EQI measures, person's emotional energy. If your physical energy is high, your emotional energy is high, it supports the third energy, which is mental energy. Mental energy is your ability to make the best decision. And if those 3 energies are connected, it helps the fourth energy, which is described as spiritual energy. And spiritual energy isn't about religion. Spiritual energy is defined as your ability to help other people, right? So you can see if I've had a bad weekend, I'm coming physically down, I'm emotionally tired, I'm not making the best mental decisions, I'm not helping anybody. But if I'm able to take those energies and kind of focus with the physical and the emotional and the mental, boom, that's my ability to help other people, which I think life is all about.
Thank you for listening in to today's episode. Tech Leadership Talks is brought to you by Texas A&M University's Master of Engineering Technical Management. To learn more, visit metm.tamu.edu.